Welcome back, everybody. I'm Phil. That's my beautiful co-host, Sam.
Hey guys, welcome back. And today we have more of the Map Men.
Yeah, we enjoyed their videos so much that we're coming back to another one before we even release that one that we did previously. So if you give us insights about the Map Men down below and we're still aloof on this one, it's because we have not released it yet, so we haven't been able to read your comments yet. But that's what we do, and we will be reading them on this video. So if you want to drop a comment and give us more insights about why there are no bridges in East London, if there's something that these guys don't elaborate on, we appreciate your insights.
Yes, we love learning from you guys.
And we love the last video that we did, like you were saying.
Yeah, that was really cool.
Yeah, where we're learning a little bit more, and that's what we do on this channel. Last one, we were learning about how to pronounce names and why they're so weird, and
how they are kind of how that name originated and where.
Culturally.
I think one thing that really stood out for me that I thought was really cool was seeing the map and seeing the different areas of where different groups of people kind of immigrated into and how that played into the pronunciation.
Cultural influence and significance over time, right? So today we're going to find out a little bit more about London and East London, it seems like in particular. I'm interested to see what this is all about and specifically why there's no bridges there. So if you're ready.
I'm ready. Let's do it.
Let's go.
In West London, you're spoilt for choice for ways to cross the River Thames.
But in East London, the Thames is your wet nemesis. Your only options to cross are queue for ages for the Blackwall Tunnel, go the huge long way round and pay the toll for the Dartford crossing, or get seasick on the so slow it's literally never worth it Woolwich ferry. This gives poor East London quite the disadvantage.
Despite the very short distance as the crow flies, if you live here, it's very unlikely you go to work or school or do your shopping or visit friends here, unless you're a crow.
Greater London effectively operates like a Pac-Man with a wacka-wacka wide gap between these isolated communities.
So how did London end up so unfairly asymmetrical? In other words, why is West London better than East London? Dun, 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 dun.
Some of you might disagree, I'm sure.
Basically, there are three reasons why it's easier to build bridges in West London than East London.
1. Geography. In the west, the River Thames is a narrow, squiggly trickle where bridge building is easy. But by the time it gets to London Bridge, it becomes a wide, majestic estuary with massive tides and marshy floodplains. Lest we forget, the Romans built London Bridge where they did, specifically because it was the widest place they could build it. 2. Shipping. In the late 19th century, when London did most of its growing, it was the biggest shipping port in the world, making bridge building east of the ports practically impossible.
The literally only bridge in East-ish London, Tower Bridge, was an incredible feat of construction. So impressive it merited its own episode. Its elaborate brute force engineering and massive cost were justified by its iconic location. A huge gateway to the heart of London for those arriving by boat.
If they wanted to build any more bridges in East London, every one of them would have to be bigger or more complicated than Tower Bridge. And that wasn't going to happen because 3. No demand.
Historically, East London has always been poorer and more sparsely populated than West London, with no rich people to pay tolls and no important people to complain. So not only was it more effort to build crossings here, it wasn't worth the effort. However, that all started to change at the end of the 19th century.
In the decades since the disastrous Thames Tunnel, the Victorians had learnt some lessons and had become rather good at digging.
Having figured out how to build miles of railways underground, all they had to do was exactly the same thing under the river.
So at the end of the 19th century, using the same technology as the Tube, London got its very first road tunnels, one at Blackwall and one at Rotherhithe.
With demand still rising and East London's population still growing, these should have been the start of a tunnel revolution spreading eastwards along the Thames throughout the 20th century. So why didn't that happen? It's a story that's been told so many times I'm getting bored of it now. Basically, the war.
First the First World War and second the Second World War put a stop to all big public projects. And when the wars were over, the money had run out, and it never really came back.
And so, the 20th century saw pretty much no new river crossings in London.
Apart from the Greenwich and Woolwich foot tunnels, which don't really count because they're just foot tunnels. Chiswick and Twickenham bridges, both part of the same road, opened on the same day in 1933. A second Blackwall tunnel, which doesn't really count because it's just a widening of the first, and the Dartford tunnel, which became 2 Dartford tunnels, which became 2 Dartford tunnels, and the QE2 bridge, which also doesn't really count because it's in not London. London found itself frozen in this asymmetrical state for more than a century.
This asymmetry gives the river a completely different character depending which side of London you're on.
In the west, the river brings prosperity and flats with views and gastropubs and university boat races. But in the east, the river brings
By the end of the 20th century, the shipping industry that prevented any crossings being built here in the first place had all but disappeared, leaving behind a string of post-industrial literal dead ends, largely untouched by regeneration or your thoughts.
The exception that proves the rule is Canary Wharf, which since the 80s has seen a rebirth as a business district full of
Has no one ever thought to try to do anything to fix this? Yes, they have, ages ago.
In the 1970s, plans were afoot for a long-awaited pill to close Pac-Man's mouth, the boringly named the East London River Crossing.
By this time, technology had moved on, and bridges had once again overtaken tunnels as the more cost-effective way to get cars across a river.
The bridge formed part of the notorious plans for new motorways in London called ringways.
On the north side, the roads were more than ready for the arrival of the new bridge.
You can clearly see on satellite view how the North Circular Road gapes expectantly open wide, ready to send and receive cross-river traffic. But on the south side, it's not clear at all where the traffic was meant to go. The new bridge would have necessitated the construction of a huge 8-lane motorway, bulldozing hundreds of households out of the way.
The people of Plumstead were understandably unhappy when the bridge got approval in 1985, but their bacon was rescued by an unlikely saviour.
2 years later, in 1987, the government accidentally built an international airport right next door to the site of the new bridge, which added a maximum height restriction on top of the already restrictive minimum height restriction.
With the bridge needing a complete redesign, that meant going through the approval process all over again. And this time, it failed, and all thoughts of a crossing here were abandoned in 1993. But not for long.
In 2004,
He's certainly creative the way he delivers his information, and he's delivering so much so fast in 5 minutes here. And I already feel like I'm going to have to go back and rewatch this one.
I feel like that's a going theme from the last one as well, where we were like, wait, what? Can we rewind like 6 times?
Yeah, how much caffeine have we had today? That was the question I think I posed in the last video. But pretty crazy how the significance of history, right? You know, what's been going on economically, whether it's a war or changes in transportation routes, which is insane also just to see the number of ships in that photo that we saw there and how times change. And then that changes the development process and, you know, the engineering and the industrialization and, you know, how it can significantly affect a place like East London even today.
Well, even the population that lives there, right? Because they were basically saying there weren't people rich enough to pay tolls, and there weren't people, it was mostly poor people or lower class people. So like there weren't people to pay the tolls, and there also wasn't the demand because like there wasn't really anybody that they cared about the complaining, right? So it's kind of like, well, we're just not going to prioritize that because you're just, you know, peasants over here.
Yeah, at the end of the day, economics usually plays a big role in development, and especially so with a city the size of London that has so much economic influence, and maybe today has less, but you know, I think in the times that we've discussed here in the video thus far, it was very, very significant place in Europe in general. So
well, I think it's also interesting too, right? Because I said the Tower Bridge, which is obviously very widely known, at the time was the furthest that they could build a bridge, right? So anything past that, it was too wide and like the conditions just weren't realistic to build a bridge. But obviously, like he said, since then, that has changed, right? Like if you look at some of the longest bridges in the world, they're freaking huge. So I'm interested to see if they ever built something there.
But not for long.
In 2004, the Mayor of London, Ken Livingstone, proposed an upgrade, or downgrade depending how you look at it, on the same site. The slightly betterly named Thames Gateway Bridge.
Ken's bridge was going to be a local bridge for local people.
There would be just 4 lanes instead of 8, 2 of which would be bus lanes, which had the potential of being turned into an extension for the DLR.
You can see on satellite view that Ken's bridge got quite far in the planning stages too.
Just north of Galleon's Reach, there's a wide concrete flyover that stops mid-air where the connection to his new bridge was going to be.
Environmentally speaking, it was a massive improvement on the monster from the 70s, but there was a major flaw in Ken's concept.
A local bridge for local people was a very naive and completely impossible thing to enforce.
I'm free to miss one. Go away.
Ken's bridge could only have been local if it were one of many crossings in East London, so that travellers had lots of options, just like how it is in West London. But with East London so far behind, the Thames Gateway Bridge on its own would unavoidably have drawn cars and lorries from all over London, congesting and polluting the narrow residential streets of Plumstead, which in many ways is worse than building a motorway through it.
The Thames Gateway Bridge was indeed designed to be joined later by the Belvedere Bridge and Silvertown Tunnel, but the locals knew that these complementary crossings wouldn't realistically have come to the rescue for decades, if they ever came at all.
For that reason, the Thames Gateway Bridge was viewed as a cause of congestion. And for that reason, it had almost no support politically or locally. And for that reason, when the next Mayor of London, Boris Johnson, came along, he took the popular and simple decision to scrap it. It was a rather odd move for Boris, a man so famously fond of bridges. Perhaps he just didn't like it because it wasn't his idea.
It's harder than ever to get big projects like bridges funded by the government and/or approved by the locals. That's why all the bridges built this century have been quite a pedestrian affair. So far, we've had the Millennium Bridge, which when first opened struggled to take the weight of pedestrians, and the Emirates Airline, an expensive over-branded cable car/tourist non-attraction connecting nowhere to nowhere else, inexplicably featured on the tube map despite a grand total of regular users of 4.
A few more pedestrian-only bridges have also been planned and not built.
At Canary Wharf, Wandsworth, Pimlico, and most high-profile of all, the profoundly unnecessary Garden Bridge, intended more for private parties and selfies than for travel, which cost £53 million just to cancel.
But these are tourist attractions at best and vanity projects at worst, and they're all in central London. They do nothing to address the fundamental packmanity of Greater London and are quite insulting to East Londoners. So now, 15 years after the Thames Gateway Bridge was cancelled, what's been put on the table to address this? The worst crossing ever proposed.
Right next door to the Blackwall Tunnel, but at a jaunty angle, is the very controversially proposed Silvertown Tunnel.
It's a very odd choice of location, given that it's one of the few parts of East London that already has lots of river crossings, and it's an even odder choice of mode. The Silvertown Tunnel is for motor traffic only, with no pedestrians, cyclists or trains allowed. Its purpose is to reduce traffic in the Blackwall Tunnel, which we really should have learnt by now, in real life will encourage more car journeys than before and create more congestion in the whole Blackwall area.
Public opinion is more anti-car than ever, which is why there's a massive campaign against the Silvertown Tunnel. And as for whether it'll ever be built, I don't know.
It's a paradox. East London desperately needs connections, but East London desperately also needs not to be ruined by pollution and congestion. So what on earth could be the solution? There's actually a rather brilliant one.
The two as yet unconnected East Londons are a great opportunity to create ambitious new non-car crossings for rail, trams, cycling and walking.
Ignoring today's demand for new roads and instead providing for journeys that don't exist yet may seem daft and will certainly cause frustration for the first few years, but when the only option to cross is a clean, green, sustainable one, people will take the clean, green, sustainable one in their thousands, and the positive effect will spread well beyond the banks of this river. For proof of how brilliantly this phenomenon works, come with me now to West London.
In 2019, nasty cracks were found in the pedestals of Hammersmith Bridge, and the local council abruptly closed it to all traffic after 132 years of service.
Wow.
Understandably, many local drivers complained, saying it would cause traffic jams. And it did at first, but then an interesting thing happened.
So you can see that the lighting has apparently changed, and we've had a power outage, but smart thinking by us, we've downloaded this video and don't need an internet connection to record. So you'll just have to deal with it being a little bit dark and dungy for the next few minutes of the video. But luckily we get to finish it.
Yes, I'm excited because I'm enjoying this.
All right. I think that's probably where we were. Let's continue.
Closed it to all traffic after 132 years of service.
Understandably, many local drivers complained, saying it would cause traffic jams. And it did at first, but then an interesting thing happened.
When Hammersmith Bridge reopened in 2021, it assumed a new role as a quiet, pleasant and safe pedestrian and cycle bridge, which has encouraged more journeys by foot and by bike, reducing car journeys and traffic not just in Hammersmith but across West London.
What Hammersmith shows us is that what we choose to build, or indeed choose to don't build, affects how we choose or don't choose to travel. And that's the way round it should be. The tide is shifting, pun massively intended, in the right direction, away from cars.
The proposed Lower Thames crossing, a scheme to fight cars with cars to try to take traffic out of the Dartford Tunnel, has been roundly rejected by locals.
There's actually been rather a lot of progress for trains lately.
No fewer than 7 new rail crossings have appeared across the Thames in the last 25 years. Wow. And there are even more proposed for the future. There's a potential rail link to Thamesmead from the DLR or overground, but probably not both. There's the Kennex Tram, a planned tram network around the riverside commuter towns in Kent and Essex linked by a tunnel, which is too far outside London to be taken seriously. And of course the Elizabeth line is going to open, tomorrow. Well, it took 3 videos, but that's pretty much the whole history of the River Thames and how Londoners have crossed it, from the Romans to the present day.
I find it fascinating how much London's relationship with its river has changed over its long history.
Yeah, 100%.
It's actually quite sad to think that what started out as a major highway and the lifeblood of London, saturated with boats of all different shapes and sizes, now spends most of its time sitting uselessly empty, a physical and mental barrier between North and South London. But will this trend, like so many others in London's evolving infrastructure, shift back the other way? Are there ways we could put our river to better use?
The Thames Clippers are starting to transform from an expensive novelty tourist attraction into a reliable commuter service. Maybe they have a future as a no-nonsense integrated part of the city's transport network, like how it is in Sydney, or Brisbane, or Copenhagen, or San Francisco, or Zurich, or Hong Kong, or Amsterdam. Or maybe they'll go completely the other way and drain the River Thames and turn it into a park. It's not that far-fetched an idea. It's exactly what they did to the River Turia in Valencia in 1969, making the city safer from flooding and opening up acres of new green space.
What future technologies lie ahead in the next 1,000 years that could see our river once again becoming a major useful highway? The answer is coming in part 4.
You know, I remember the first time my grandfather gave me Surfshark VPN.
All right, so we've got another VPN ad here. I think they added this at the end. Yeah, it looks like that. Anyways, so Sam, you are surprised, I imagine, by the changes in the history of what's happened with the river here. To me, I was thinking exactly what he said, that, you know, it's incredible to me that the lifeblood of a city can change so much in its use case, in how people view it, whether it's a problem, a nuisance, or an additive to the community. And you see just, you know, in so many different spots, it has so much of a different impact.
For sure. I think some of the things that really stood out to me, especially in the second half here, were when he was talking about how reducing the access to bridges, like car-based travel, encouraged more people to walk and bike, and it actually changed like how many people were commuting in the ways that they were commuting.
Yeah.
So I thought that was kind of cool to see. And also, you know, it makes a lot of sense, like he was talking about changes throughout time, because historically a lot of shipping was done via boat, right? Whereas these days not very much is. So obviously the need for that river for shipping and import and export related services is probably reduced by a lot. One thing I was surprised by though is that they haven't introduced more boat-based commute services. You'd think if like the river is what's separating a lot, like they would have introduced, like he was talking about there at the end, how some people are starting to transition over to that, but having more pedestrian based boat commute services like taxis or boat taxis or whatever, right? Like you'd think somebody would have capitalized on that business opportunity. And there was one other thing I was going to
especially when the infrastructure they were saying is likely already there for being able to provide that style of transportation, because like we just said, they were doing, you know, shipments and were transporting throughout that lane for such a long time that you feel like the infrastructure would already be there to provide, you know, docking stations and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Right? So,
and I mean, if most people, it takes you like, you know, 30, 45 minutes to drive to work commuting with traffic and the bridge and whatever, it's like you could hop on a boat and cross and probably still get to your job in a similar amount of time.
I did find it interesting as well, the emphasis on clean transportation throughout this video. Sounds like, you know, we're not from the UK, but it sounds like a driving force in some of the policy making decisions are the impacts on the environment and, you know, at the same time trying to mitigate, you know, congestion in vehicle transportation and utilize all the transportation services that are available at the same time as, you know, reducing the footprint, so to speak, on the
large balancing act.
Yeah. So it's hard to please everybody. That's the point, right? I think that's what we went through in this, is that there's just so much push and pull throughout, and you have one person comes up with an idea and then it gets pushed back from another group of people and, you know, leaves you in this state of limbo.
Yeah, the last thing I'll say that I thought was very interesting and I had never heard of before was the idea of draining the river and making it.
Yeah, no.
Well, it's like at first I thought he was joking, but then he used an example in Valencia how they did that, and they basically turned it into like green space where people could walk or bike, or I guess you could easily build a bridge in that sense because you're building it over land.
I don't think that would go too well in line with the environmental impacts that it's going to cause of draining the river. So
yeah.
Anyways, that was informative, right?
Yeah, it was.
Let us
Gives you
know what
lots
you
to
guys
think
think
about.
down below. Let us know if he missed out on anything in particular in this, or they, I should say. They were entertaining as they were in the last one, and that is not to be overlooked. So make sure you go and support their channel. Make sure you give them a subscribe. And we always love to support the creators that we check out on our channel. So I've enjoyed both their videos. Let us know if there's another one that we should check out before or well, no, not before we go, because we're about to go now, and that would be impossible.
Once you're watching this, let us know.
Before we go, though, before we finish the video, I'm trying to tell you, leave a comment so that we can check out more of their videos if you think we should. Anything you want to ask, Sam?
No, I enjoyed it. I'd like to see more. I feel like they're very informative. And like you said, they're very quick paced, but I still find them to be informative and easy to follow in the sense that it's entertaining.
Yeah. All right, guys, that's it from us today. Have a great day. We'll see you on our next video.